Hey there, campers. Welcome back to Camp Quest. We're doing another Lorcana video. I have Gibby here. Gibby is joining me to do a little tier list post-Hiram. Now, we're doing it a little bit different. We're not grading individual deck lists, and the reason why we're not doing that is because they're going to change a lot. The first 2 or 3 weeks in a new meta is going to oscillate wildly in terms of how individual decks are played, positioned, teched, etc. So instead what we're doing is we are grading all 15 color combinations in terms of their potential as you are beginning to prepare for set championships. These are going to be coming up in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on where you live. And so you're going to want to be playing your Lorcana games with intention, testing towards decks that you think you are going to want to play. I know for myself, I'm really focused in on 2 or 3 color combinations right now, and although I do play against a lot of the stuff, I am at the place where I'm not trying to play everything. I'm honing in on the things that I really think I'm going to be playing for the set championship season. So, Gibby, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be sharing my screen here. I'm going to start tossing you color combinations. You give me your first take on them, and then I will jump in and give you my take as well, and we will agree on a grade. Sound good?
Sounds great to me. I am ready to hit the first color combo whenever you've selected one.
All right. I'm going to first have us talk about Amber Amethyst. Really interesting one to kick off because I think that there's some new developments.
Yeah, Amber Amethyst is a very interesting color combo. It has historically been predominantly dominated by the full-out blitz aggro game plan, but since in recent we've seen some of the predominance rise in evasives being included within decks and a more mid-range version of Amber Amethyst with a more evasive heavy package has we've seen that at the forefront as of recently. So I'm not super high on either. I think the color combination as well, or overall has legs,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't necessarily strike me as a top contender out the gate or one that is has an overwhelming amount of favorable matchups compared
Mm-hmm.
to some other color combinations. So I kind of like exactly where you slotted it. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I have kind of Amber Amethyst at like the B tier.
Yeah, no. So I have here. What I'll do from now on is I'll put them in S tier, and then we can downgrade them as we decide, right?
Sure,
But I,
sure.
I think that makes sense. B tier is cool. I think hyper aggro is not that good right now. I think steel decks are doing really well. There was even a steel deck or a tournament where the top 8 of a 30 plus player tournament was all steel decks, right? And that could be a little bit of local meta shenanigans, but like I do think steel decks are really good right now. I think hyper aggro is going to really stink into steel. But man, this evasive mid-range build is kind of cool. I feel like it actually leverages Rapunzel super well. And can do some really, nice things with that big Iago 4/6 body, and then you heal it back up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think B tier is fair for it. I don't think there's a lot of depth to this color combination. You really only have hyper aggro and this now sort of newer like mid range. You can maybe squeeze Mufasa in or something. I know there for a while there was
Sure.
sort of like a niche Mufasa deck with this, but I think that
Purple Faucet.
I think it's going to be a function of like the upside of this is that like mid range grind them off the board with the amethyst side of things, and there's a lot of other people that are a lot of other color combinations that can do that and maybe have a little bit more of more options. So I think B tier is fine for that. It works for me.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pull random ones because I think it's more fun to do that instead of doing it in order. So I'm just gonna grab one here.
Keep me guessing.
How about Emerald and Sapphire? This is a tough one. I'm starting you off hard.
Yeah. So Emerald and Sapphire. This is one of the color combinations that I would say has gone through a rejuvenation process over the
Mm-hmm.
last set or two. The Baja Blast, as most people like to call it, and that is like an undoubtedly delicious drink. So I
That's right.
prefer to call it Baja Blast as well. The
Yeah.
Baja Blast color combination has received quite a few new tools, especially with the dual ink cards.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the oh goodness, the robot from Big Hero Six.
Baymax. Yeah.
Yeah, so Baymax, the shift and the universal shift Baymax, I think
Mm-hmm.
is super super cool. the Hero Hamada that
Hero is really interesting.
that per one, if when you shift on top of the cheaper hero to get to get the card drop, but then also you're protecting all of your Floodborns, kind of protecting your investment, as I like to look at it.
Yeah.
So that way your big units kind of stay on board. I think that's a really interesting game strategy. Ink Geyser is like the card that I think has perplexed more people than anything
Hmm.
else from set seven, and it can win you games if you
Right.
know how to use it. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
go ahead and say I am not somebody who knows how to use it that well. It's just not. It's just not a card that I think I figured out.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, as the color combination, there's a
Hmm.
couple routes you can take it. I'm not looking at that as a top contender either.
Hmm.
I think it is strong. I think it can win some games. I think it is if you are looking to play an off meta deck and be try to contend if you I think it requires a lot of practice, but I think it
Right.
does have legs.
Yeah.
Similar to how Blurple also requires a good
Hmm.
amount of practice because of some of the options that you have and really
Yeah.
knowing your play patterns. I would put Emerald Sapphire between B and maybe C.
Hmm.
We just haven't seen the results come through that have
Yeah.
shown me that it really has the ability to compete really well across the field, but it can win games. So I'm kind of putting it between B and C.
I kind of like that. I think, I did see a tournament where a Bend to My Will deck came through and performed really well. I think it was last weekend, not this weekend that just passed, but the weekend before, the first weekend post Hiram. I think Bend to My Will is the best deck in this color combination, and I did play it at two set champs.
Mm-hmm.
Last set, I won with Amber Steel Mines that Gibby and I sort of refined to our liking, and it performed great for both of us. And then after that, I was like, let me just have some fun, and so I played Bend to My Will, and it was an enlightening experience. And I think the reason why I want to put it into C tier is because I learned that deck, as cool as it is, it really has a hard time to steal because of Pete, and Pete is a universal truth these days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the deck really flops into the Amber Steel decks, especially, but Amethyst Steel it has a really hard time into, and they're faster than ever. So I think that if the best version of this that I've seen so far is sort of really polarized, I think I want to put in C tier. Now, C tier, in my estimation, is you can take it to a set championship and you can potentially win, but the stars have to align.
Yeah,
And
I
you
think
have
that's
to be really
great.
good at it.
I think that this is a color combo that requires a good amount of practice. Like the margin for error in your
Hmm.
play compared to some of the other decks that are just loaded with value,
Yeah,
its margin is much smaller. You've got to know what you're doing.
for sure, for sure. All right, let's talk about a little bit more of a mainstream one here. Let's talk about Amethyst Emerald. I think you and I have had a lot of disagreements about this color combination over
Over the course of
probably the
time.
a lot for pretty much since set two. Set two, we both loved it, and since that, from then on, we've had a lot of disagreements on both sides of the fence in terms of like whether we think it's good or not, depending on the set. Give me your impressions of Amethyst Emerald. There's a few ways to play it.
Yes, Emerald, Amethyst. I have played this deck in several seasons, and admittedly, I wanted to play it in a set championship, but it was about the time that I was
Mm-hmm.
moving back here to Virginia, not too long ago, a couple sets ago, and I just didn't have the deck together in time. By
Mm-hmm.
the time I moved, and I was like, okay, what box are my cards backed in? And
Right.
I couldn't get it together in time. But I did think that the deck was positioned relatively well. I
Mm-hmm.
have always loved Emerald Amethyst's ability to what feels like it's one of the best slots to slap in a good amount of evasive. So if you think
Mm-hmm.
that an evasive strategy is going to perform well against the field, then I do think this is a card combination that can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of we're seeing that now, right? We're seeing even outside of the typical tempo that
Mm-hmm.
we have seen over the course of several seasons, we're seeing a more evasive heavy deck with some new tools like Iago and even utilizing the kind of existing Peter Pan Shadow Finder, or even throwing some discard tools into there. There are a couple different avenues to take that we're seeing it. But I
Right.
think there's an important distinction which you and I have joined forces on
Mm-hmm.
now, which
Mm-hmm.
is just tournament results doesn't necessarily dictate strength
True.
of a color combination. And we've seen a it's like a half discard, half evasive
Yeah,
deck.
hybrid build.
Yeah, like a hybrid build performed very well on a couple different fronts recently within the last several weeks.
Right.
But I don't think that's not proving to me that Amethyst Emerald is a top tier deck or a top tier color combination. In my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, I do think it is beatable. I think it is
Mm-hmm.
solvable, and I do expect it to be phased under the rug in the coming weeks and months as we approach the set championships. And I'm thinking
Yeah.
more closer to a B tier,
Mm-hmm.
truthfully, than the A or S tier that it might appear right now once the meta continues to evolve.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that a lot of people have it, are valuing it extremely highly right now. And I get it. I like Emerald Amethyst. I want to like it more, to be honest. And I think the issue right now is you are encountering a lot of situations where, like, when you build Emerald Amethyst, because you don't have ruby or steel removal to fall back on, you are almost always forced into a either aggressive game plan or a board trading attrition game, right? Which you can play because you have Amethyst. And Amethyst is great at those style of play where you're playing down your Elsas, you're tapping things down, you're taking trades, you're buffing things with crabs and whatnot, and you're drawing a lot of cards to hopefully out attrition them. The problem I think that I have with it is you have this discard build, which is trying to play discard at a fast game speed, as opposed to the other discard decks, which are trying to play it with controlling options. And if the field proves to be as wide as I expect it to be come set championships, and if evasives, which are extremely popular right now, end up cooling a little bit as people begin respecting red blue, begin respecting ruby amethyst control, which right now a lot of ruby amethyst is mid range, but I do think that whenever you live in a mid range meta, ruby amethyst can then slow down, play more removal.
Mm-hmm.
And grind the games to a halt. I just question if Emerald Amethyst can build a deck that is both consistent and has toolbox answers to all of the different things they might encounter, ranging from the red blue Maui half shark lists and the ruby amethyst half shark lists to the emerald steel and amber steel, kill everything with songs, to even some of the more like aggressive, like Amber Steel aggro,
Sure.
Sapphire Steel aggro. So it's like, I I question if you can build it that in a way that is not super polarized. And I want it to work. I think the hybrid build has a lot of potential, but I think it is a very like current meta list, and I want to see what it looks like in 3 weeks, and I'm worried that there will be a list that is like, I have great matchups into the red decks, but bad matchups into steel. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, that's where Emerald Amethyst has tended to be most of the time, anyways. So why would that change radically now? And I don't trust that a full discard build is the way to go anymore. So I don't know. I think I want to put it in A, but like the bottom of A. Like B is tempting, but it's definitely like top of B, bottom of it. Let's put it in A, and we can look at the other things we put in A and shift it down later if we want.
Sure.
This
That's
is the
fine.
one that like I think Gibby and I like we even talked before we recorded about like what do we think about this color combination. Let's pick a different one. Let's get this one out of the way. Emerald Ruby. Is there any reason to play this in a tournament?
I I struggle to find a reason for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that you can't. I think if you're going to go like an evasive route, which you've seen before with some of these Emerald Ruby combinations, I just think there's better evasive decks out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to try to go on a more action-based list with Maui Half Shark, well, I think there's better Maui Half Shark lists out there. I am really intrigued and was hopeful for the Emerald Ruby build that was the with the new Queen of Hearts that was going to be kind of damage ping focused and
Yeah.
being able to add damage onto the board as units come on for your opponent, and being able to handle them in a very unique way,
Hmm.
and play almost a little bit of a mid-range control with that. I was hopeful that that would be a new, like, fun found way that actually works and is cohesive and does well, and it just feels like it's a little bit too fragile. It
Yeah,
just
as
it
it
just
turns
misses
out,
too
an
often.
uninkable 5 drop with 2 attack and neither evasive nor ward doesn't tend to live.
No,
Um,
it might as well be a
so
2/2.
it is it's a shame because I was excited about that as well. This color combination has shenanigans and spades, but no reliable card draw other than Diablo. The best thing you can probably do is some sort of discard style build with like Prince John, Robin Hood,
Yeah, for
Sharpshooter,
sure.
and maybe Maui Shark in there as well. But again, to your point, everyone else does those things better. You can discard better in 3 other colors. You can play half shark better in 2 other colors. Like what are you actually getting here? This is where like I think this belongs in the D tier, which is reserved for decks that I would actively push people away from playing in a set championship. And I know that for a lot of our viewers this seems obvious, but I do work with a lot of, newer players in the game that see some of the cool factors of these color combinations or the unique ness of these color combinations. They want to give it a go. But this is where if somebody came up to me at League and said, "Hey Ian, I've been working on this deck, what do you think?" And I'd say, if it's Emerald and Ruby, I think you play anything else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, D
so
tier here stands for don't expect to make the top cut.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Don't play. D for don't play. Let's see here.
D
I
for do something
think
else.
yeah. Let's pull out Sapphire Steel.
Tough one as well.
Tough.
Something that performed previously really well. That,
Hmm.
I mean, Hiram was a big part of that game plan. Oh, look, Forest Sphere. This got the double whammy from
Yeah.
getting banned 2 cards.
Double
Both
whammy.
Forest
Yeah.
Sphere and Hiram. I think Hiram is more punishing though to this deck, just like it was for Sapphire and Ruby.
Hmm.
I don't. It's not that I don't think you can play Sapphire Steel. Steel is still performing very well. The deck just looks different now because you
Hmm.
really just don't have that card draw engine that you so desperately needed when you were playing the item heavy build. The item Exodia build, as I'm going to call it, because it kind of is that, where it's like it's almost similar, like the stars have to align and you get all your cards out and then hope that no one touched the cards that you had on the board, and
Hmm.
that's how you won through it. But the minute someone messes with you at all, you're like, well, my entire game plan just fell apart. So uh, I think you can still play other versions of Sapphire Steel, like an
Hmm.
aggro version, like a true
Yeah.
aggro ward version with Alice and Cogsworth and other cards like that. Just a you can't touch me build versus a please don't touch me build.
Right.
Um, I still think it is viable. It is
Hmm.
just also not the predominant deck that you still see playing a lot. But one I wouldn't be surprised to pop back up as a meta continues to evolve. You
Right.
still have some of the action denial, which I think is really
Hmm.
important for the aggressive decks in this current environment, both with Pete, and you could even see a couple splashes of the Gantu that you and I were so high on set
Hmm.
7. I've played around with it on some online games, and I've really enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
think it is a little bit better than people. While it's not making its way into meta decks right now, I do think it could be an interesting splash if you really have to focus on action denial to maintain a foot in the game. So
Yeah.
I'm personally thinking that it's around the B tier right now. I'm not feeling like there is a solved place for it that gives me confidence that it's anything more than that, but it has all the potential in the world.
I agree. I mean, I think B tier is appropriate for it. I think that the aggro deck is real, but I'm not convinced it's the best way to play aggro.
Yeah.
It definitely has certain edges over like Amber Steel Mines, which is playing basically the same steel package. It is got a little bit more survivability at the expense of a little bit less card draw and a little bit less aggressive questing. So yeah, I think this is an appropriate place to put it. I also think that like theoretically a whole new world build is still on the table. I would not be surprised if someone surfaced with like a true mid range deck. Maybe leveraging Tragic Beast, Whole New World, or maybe like really fighting hard for the board plate. That King Arthur that lets something challenge ready characters. That's a kind of a cool card that's been floating around fringe viability. So I think it's got a lot of potential. It's just really still reeling from the nerfs, and I think it's going to take a while for the try hard, dedicated, Sapphire Steel players to put the work in and iron out a reliable, consistent game plan for something other than aggro. So I think B tier's
agreed.
Here's another one that I know you'll be excited about once my computer catches up.
Allows you to actually grab it.
Yeah.
So Amber and Ruby.
One of
this
your
is
old favorites.
Old favorites, and I'm bringing it back, baby. You and I have been talking about Red Fossa recently, and it's probably the deck that I've been playing the most, and honestly having the most success with. But I need to take a step back and not have a biased approach about the overall color combination and where it currently sits. Something I do want to impress upon the community here is if you are interested in playing this color combination, message me on Discord. Put a comment down below on the video, and I would be happy to discuss kind of how my testing has gone and provide you my current list with it, because I am having a lot of fun and a lot of success with some of the against a lot of the meta decks right now.
Yeah,
this is a color combination that historically in that manner does really well against Ruby Amethyst, and we're going to see a Ruby Amethyst predominance pop back up, and that be a strong deck list along with still notes of Ruby Sapphire. I do think this could be a really great off meta deck in the right local scene to take and do some damage with. That being said, overall as a color, I don't think it's top tier. I don't think we should be putting it in that realm. I think it has viability in the right packages, but there's also a very narrow way to play this deck right now, or this color combination right now. Not a whole lot of options like we're going to see with a couple other colors. Combos that we're going to be talking about here shortly that are going to make their way on a little bit higher up on the ranks. I actually think you could put this in B as well. I think the one way that we're talking about being that mid-range kind of early ramp with Gaston into some of the ladies in chairs for removal. The card draw is really great, which you need to be able to do in a kind of controlling matchups when you're facing B prepareds. You have to be able to keep a healthy hand. I do think that this deck can do that very well with Rapunzels and Surfer Stitches and Pongos. They've got the card draw options to keep a healthy hand and I don't know, push the lore count quickly if you don't deal with them.
Sure. I guess I would challenge you to think through, do you think this is I know you said B tier. It's definitely a deck which it has sort of one way to play, and if that way to play isn't positioned well, it falls off the map, right?
Yep.
Do you think that qualifies it as a B tier or a C tier deck?
I think because of the viability of that one narrow option that we're currently talking about, in this as it currently stands, I do think it does sit more appropriately in B. But it is one that maybe we put towards the back of B, because you're right. If the meta continues to shift, and
if discard can overcome the evasive meta that is right now, for like challenging it, or if basically, if there's enough diversity that discard has a healthy place, I think this deck suffers tremendously.
What this deck doesn't do very well is if you don't find Brawl in your hand, is deal with Diablo. That great. And they do have the ability in most cases. Well, if you get Gaston on 3, you can ramp in some really good options and shut down their tools.
Yeah.
And they can't really with Ursula, they can't really touch any cards in your hand. It's kind of like a dead 2-drop for them. However, if you don't find your card draw, it's an interesting combination I would love to talk about later with that matchup. But yeah. I do think it is a little weaker if discard becomes the best deck, but it is still a competable matchup. I do think it still sits in the back of B.
All right, sounds good. We will. I'll trust the expert here on this one. Let's go ahead and grab one of these steel decks. Emerald Steel.
I think it sits right where I think it sits in A. Right now, I do not. You and I have talked about this quite heavily recently, post Hiram ban. A lot of the decks, and we kind of touched on it with Emerald Amethyst, on
Mm,
why the perception of Emerald Amethyst is so high, is because, and I think to your point, you made this kind of clarification and put it very poignantly. A lot of people really thought we were moving into a discard meta.
mm-hmm.
So they played counter discard decks, which I would count Emerald Amethyst because of the amount of card draw it
While
has, because of
previously it
the
was only being played as discard.
yeah, and because it's got the evasive pressure and the
Mm-hmm.
abilities to turn things sideways with Elsa Fifth Spirit and handle the Diablos and some of those packages very well and turn those evasives into rush characters. I think that people thought we were moving into a super heavy discard meta, and it will be there. I think it'll still be there,
Yeah.
but we are not going to be dominated and controlled by
Mm-hmm.
discard. I would still put it at A. I think there are plenty of decks that can handle and deal with discard. The more Amethyst we see in the meta, the
Mm-hmm.
worse discard becomes because you cannot run them out of cards.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I have conflicted thoughts on Emerald Steel. In my mind, I think it is still the best deck in the game when it hits, when it fires on all cylinders. Um, and I have similar thoughts about Amber Steel, but we'll get to that in a minute. I think the thing about Emerald Steel and the reason I agree to put it in A as opposed to S, and I think that I want to be very careful about putting things in S tier. Um, just because like I think the line between S and A is blurry right now. This is just our basic, and the reason why I don't want to talk about individual lists, and the reason I want to talk about potential for color combination, is because I could look at Emerald Steel and be like, in a certain metagame, Emerald Steel will always be the best thing in the room. And sometimes, even in a rough metagame, if you hit your, Diablo shift into a song, put it on a cove, like, what beats that? Not a lot. So I think that, like, Emerald Steel on its good days is a S tier deck. But then by the same coin, we've talked about it a lot on this channel. And even though I play a lot of Emerald Steel discard, it is it loses to itself a certain amount of games. And I think the key here is like there are a lot of ways to tech the Emerald Steel deck, but there's really only one way to play this color combination, and that is discard. I see every once in a while someone will get excited about a mid-range Emerald Steel deck, and I just roll my eyes and go, I don't think this is real. I think we have the evidence to back the idea that a non-discard Emerald Steel mid-range deck is a little bit of a mirage. I think A is fine, mostly because I think that its weakness of inconsistency is a big enough reason to like, and its limitations to be able to like, it's like, okay, how many do you play morphs? What's your morph SME count? Like, do you play muses or Tinkerbells? How many, hypnotize do you run in your deck? Like, that's really the extent of these decks in terms of their changes. Like, you can push it a little bit faster with some merfolks. Maybe you put a dock or so in, but like the core, like 45 cards just never changes.
Yeah, it's like going back to old Ruby Amethyst. You're like, okay, what small adjustments are you gonna make? But
Mm-hmm.
you see green and you see steel.
Yeah.
You see him ink a Strength of a Raging Fire, and you see him slap Diablo, and then you're like, okay, it's green steel. I know about 45 cards of what they're playing already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Most likely, they're playing a Diablo here if I don't do anything about it. Like
Right.
you know what's coming, which is good and bad.
Yeah, and it's very strong. So I
Yeah,
don't want to like I don't want to yeah, I don't want this to be perceived as a slight against Emerald Steel. I think
we're not besmirching Discard's name, but we're
that's
also
right.
being realistic about it.
That's right. That's right. Okay, let's talk about one of the elephants in the room here, which is Ruby Sapphire.
I like Ruby Sapphire as well as an A tier deck. I do think it got hit with the nerfs to Hiram. I do
Mm-hmm.
not expect it to go away though. This is something that we need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this time and time again, similar to Discard, that Ruby Sapphire tends to make a return as we get closer to the end of a set,
Yep.
similar to Discard, because those two color combinations in particular are very expressive skill decks,
Mm-hmm.
where the top players find a way to make it their own and to get the most juice out of that orange and show off just how good the color combination can be because they are really good pilots of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ruby Sapphire, the overall game plan, I don't think has changed. It's just some of you're going to end up changing out some of the cards to find other ways, which you and I have mentioned in our prior video. If you haven't watched it already, go back and watch it, where
Mm-hmm.
we talked about the tools are already there for Sapphire to have the card draw. It's just different tools. So you have to retrofit your deck to make sure that you don't run your own hand out of cards.
Mm-hmm.
You're still playing through the Maui Half Sharks. You're still probably dropping a couple um, McDuck Manors on the board if you don't think that your opponent can handle it. If not, you're inking them. You're getting your big Sisus out and you're trying to control the board. You're playing a couple Pirates Light and bouncing back to your hand. That is still the core of
Mm-hmm.
what we're seeing in a lot of these Ruby Amethyst or these Ruby Sapphire decks.
Yeah.
Um, but no Hiram obviously makes it less consistent, makes it a little bit harder. The tools you're replacing it with are less than ideal. Being Hiram was the ideal candidate.
Sure.
So I do think that A is still appropriate.
Yeah, it's interesting. Can I pitch you? Can I pitch you on S?
Okay.
And we
Elevator pitch.
Yeah, let me give you the elevator pitch. I think obviously the DKP list, Maui Half Shark. You know, you play something on one that replaces itself. Whether it's develop or popsicle, you ramp on 2, you potentially ramp again on 3, and then you play a half shark, and it's like, what do they do? And if they're playing aggro, you can take a step back. You don't have to ramp on 3. You can play a Tala or a Super Goof or a Manor if you need to put the pressure on for whatever reason, right? Like, and then you can follow up with a Maui Hero to all the next turn. Like, it's very straightforward early game lines, right? And then basically you still have the scenario where because you have so much filter in the deck, you know, like 4 visions, 4 develop, whatever, like you can just sort of like top deck something random, and almost always, more often than not, it turns into another card, usually a card you want, right? And then of course the Maui Half Shark puts a big freeze on the board when you can put the Maui Half Shark down ahead of any other deck, and usually ahead of when they can actually answer it. Unless they have a singer to hit it with a Zeus. So like there's that. And I think it's very strong. I think it's very linear, and I think that like outside of a few like tech options, like okay, do you run some Sisus at the top end or some Scars or whatever? How many brawls are you running? That's really strong. And it sucks against discard. So that's a point against it. But also, like, I've been seeing, like, in the dregs of Lorcanito and some channels here and there, that there's some people doing some weird stuff with popsicles and Maurice's workshops and Scuttle and Queen Diviner and playing the Scrooges and playing Big Tamatoas and grinding some games out in really interesting ways, ending games with like 10 items on the board. Because there's this unexplored package within Blue of characters that either put items into play for free or put items into your hand. I don't know if that's like ready yet, but like I watched a game, and I don't want to say the wrong person, but I also don't want to give credit. I'll flash it up on the screen if I remember like whose channel it is. But I watched a game of Ruby Amethyst playing against this item, you know, smorgasbord deck, and I was blown away by how effective it was at recovering and like pressuring or forcing responses from the Ruby Amethyst player, and pressuring comebacks off of the back of like chaining, you know, a workshop from a queen into an item from a Scuttle, draw, play a Tamatoa or play big Sisu to kill something, or little Sisu, Sapphire Coil, right? I think the Coil build is still secretly there, and we know the upwards power of Sapphire Ruby. It has for like 4 sets continued to surge up to the top. So, can I pitch you on S tier potential?
If you're seeing other decks that I'm not, then maybe it's appropriate to be up there if you expect it to surprise us in a week or two
I
with
just
an unhidden build.
I think
Um,
that Sisu on Ice isn't dead. Like
I didn't think it was either. I don't think
yeah,
I don't think that color combo can't play control anymore. I'm not saying that it can.
yeah,
It just is requires some maneuvering
right.
to be anywhere near what it
And
was.
they'll have weaknesses. That build will have weaknesses.
That's the
It's
best
not
part about it,
yeah,
is that we can now beat the deck
yeah.
and it doesn't surprise you when you beat the deck. It doesn't have a 60% matchup table against everything, which is
Yeah.
the whole
Thank
point of why
goodness,
they
right?
banned Hiram, right?
Yeah.
So good on them for improving that. And I'm happy to see that the color combination isn't like gone.
Right.
It's still here.
This is a formality. I'll just put this here.
Moving on.
Cool, great. It's bad. Uh, Alice Midrange, rest in peace. It's super fun.
R.I.P.
It's super
Yeah.
bad.
Well, I really want princes and queen, prince or queen, like a royalty deck to be good. I really want to be able to
Puppies.
play a puppies. I really want to be able to play a healing deck at the top with Grandpappy. Like I've always wanted to be able to play a
Yeah.
Grandpappy deck with healing and gain and like burst a million lore off of that. Instead of items, you're just bursting off of healing and
Right.
having a big board. Would love that. Just don't have it.
It's not there. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, let's talk Amber Emerald. That's another tough one.
It is another tough one. We've seen as of recent the Chernadog deck, as everyone calls it,
Yeah.
where you've got a couple Chernabogs at the top,
Yeah.
and you are playing a bunch of units out on board to go really wide, go really cheap, using Tramp, the 2-drop Tramp to buff
Yep.
everything, requesting pretty hard. And I like that deck. We spent weeks trying to test it and get
Yep.
it to a place where we were happy with it. I don't know about you. I never found the right place where I could put and back and put my stamp of approval on that deck and go, I've got confidence that I can run it and it be that deck for me. But that
I
doesn't mean that that's not the case for other people.
I had some success with it specifically against Sapphire Steel. Like I was having a good matchup. Like I had a positive win rate. Let's just say that against Sapphire Steel. Had a harder time against Ruby Sapphire, but because that deck was like pretty slow. With the Sisu build, I sometimes was able to get under it, and I ran Prince Ericsson stuff or Prince Phillips. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's definitely worse because discard crushes it. Because you all of a sudden can't play the tramp stuff. You can't play Yzmas. You also don't want to draw a bunch of cards. There's a Diablo out there. And while you do have Diablo answers, like it has a hard time
Yeah.
against discard. And I think it also has a hard time against more proactive red, blue, and even Ruby Amethyst. So, and Steel Song is okay. It actually, so the deck has a lot of characters with big butts, which makes the steel removal harder. But because Amethyst is so strong right now, and discard is also over here pretty strong, there's too many bad matchups. I don't like Chernadog in this meta. I love the deck in general, and I think it's cool. And then you have the Amber Emerald discard, which, man, I have such mixed thoughts on.
Never know what to make of it. I never know if it's good. It's almost like
It
you win a couple games with it, and you're like, yeah, the formula's there,
it's insane, yeah.
and then you take it to a tournament, or like you poor Lindsay,
Yeah.
she's a great pilot of the deck, but it always seems to fall flat at the wrong moments. Like it's
Yeah.
just never consistent enough.
I played several games with it on Lorcanita the other day, but then I also watched some games IRL where Brian was playing it against Lindsay on Blurple. And the fascinating thing was there was one game where the deck looked just godlike. And then it lost the next two because it drew the wrong half of the deck at the wrong time. Worse even than Steel Emerald discard. It has the highest brick percentage of all of those decks, but the upwards power of being able to dump their hand and get the Under the Sea Kita board wipe, it's crazy. Like the max power is so high, and the consistency just feels under what I would feel comfortable taking to a tournament. Um, and like you'll win some games flashy, and then you'll lose some games because you can't play the game. I would like to put this, and I hate saying this because I feel like some. Here's the thing: I want to put it in C tier with the caveat that you will see people topping tournaments with this every once in a while. But
I mean,
again,
that's the definition of it, though, isn't it? Like the stars have to align.
the stars have to align both in your matchups, and you have to draw well enough. And I think Chernodog is the same thing from a different angle. Like you got to hit the right matchups if you genuinely want to take Chernodog to like a top cut in an event. You really have to hit the right spread of matchups, and I just don't feel comfortable recommending that you play those decks unless you're willing to accept those risks. Again, C tier is not. We're not saying C tier. We're not saying C tier that we're not even saying they're bad decks. We're just saying they're risky plays. The potential is capped, and the reason I feel that way about the Emerald Amber discard is because again it suffers into these faster metas at times, but it also is like there's like no new cards that are really worth playing right now. It doesn't have a lot of like consistency tools that have been added over a good period of time. So I just don't feel like that is you can totally win a set champ with it. It's just going to be one of those things where like the stars have to align. Yeah. So, Ruby Steel.
Ruby Steel, we had such high hopes for in the prior of this set because of Mushu and a lot of the ability to challenge. I just have a more effective package to be able to gain lore off of challenges, which is at the core what this color combo wants to do.
Yeah.
It still heavily struggles because it doesn't have great card draw options outside of some very creative but inconsistent options like Medallion Weights or Sumerian Talisman, or you just almost have to play a whole new world in this color combination. So card draw really is the bane of this existence on why it's really not that top tier. I played some games against it recently where it was close. It's not that the deck can't do it.
Right.
It is just not. It still is missing some things. Like it needs that Hiram to put it over the edge.
Yeah.
It
needs a
needs
card draw consistency tool.
Yeah, which too, it's not like that the developers haven't input card draw options into the color combo, but they just haven't been good enough. And I think maybe they're a little afraid that if they do put a good tool in here, that this deck won't be able to be stopped. Like one good tool just shoots it to the moon.
I don't know. I mean, I think their opportunity to do that was the Duel Links, and I hope they do more Duel Links. But instead of giving them a card draw tool through the Duel Link combination, they added more payoff for what it already was good at and wanted to do, which is challenge. So it's like, yes, Mushu's pretty cool. I think the Li Shang that lets you challenge ready characters is cool. He's a little
the Duel Link Mulan is cool.
Duel Link Mulan's cool. Kind of niche, but good if in the right scenarios. The problem is, of course, if they give Ruby more card draw, then Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst take off. If they give Steel more card draw, then Amethyst Steel and definitely Amber Steel take off. So it's like, how do you need to be giving it to just this color combination. And I think they missed the mark on the Duel Links a little bit, but we may see more Duel Links in the future, which I think that would be a perfect storm to make this a little bit more relevant. Do you think this is truly D tier? Because it feels above these other two.
I'd say C. It's where I was going to go with it, as I think that there's a path forward. You can play it. It has a cohesive thought behind how you can run a deck with Ruby Steel, but the stars have to align.
Yeah.
Do not expect to be able to. I mean, this deck just hates to see evasive.
Tough. It feels between these two. Like, I do not think it's as good as these two, but it's definitely not as bad as these two.
Yeah, it's sort of run over a deck that like this deck would run over a deck like Chernodog because you're questing a bunch of things and it's going to challenge It's going to challenge everything. Nothing of it is going to die, and they're going to quest faster than you can refill your board, or they're going to take advantage of you refilling your board. So it's going to crush some decks, but then it's going to be just absolutely incapacitated against evasive decks.
Yeah, and decks that don't put characters out. Like Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst are going to be like, cool, I just won't play characters, and I'll wait till I can wipe your board, and then you have the card draw to recover. Cool, bro.
I'm just going to continue to play card draw options and then exert them, banish them so you can't challenge them, and then just be prep, and now you've got no board.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it here. Bottom of C. Okay, let's talk about Blurple.
Excited to talk about Blurple.
I might have to. I need to get Lindsay in to talk Blurple one of these days, because this is like her
she's the expert. She's the expert at Blurple.
I mean,
for
really,
sure.
It's gotten to the point where, like, you know, even though Lindsay's a relatively newer TCG player, and I have all these, you know, literal decades of experience playing TCGs, sometimes she like pops in with this insight about Blurple. I'm like, I had never thought of that.
She is definitely the person I would ask if you have any questions. So also, if you've got Blurple questions, hit up Lindsay, because she will gladly share any list that she's working on and run you through basically an SOP of how to play that color combo.
Yeah, for sure.
It's awesome. Blurple, I think, is sneaky.
Yeah.
I would put it in A. I really would.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is there. It's not hard to imagine winning a tournament or going deep with Blurple in a tournament. I mean, Lindsay did it last set, and it was impressive to watch her do it. Blurple's got all the tools of any other major mid-range to late game Amethyst deck. Mm-hmm. If anything, it approaches the matchups a bit differently because it's ramping.
Yeah.
So it's putting different emphasis on certain ink costs because you're skipping certain ink numbers more often with the ramp tools. But it does have a very unique access to a different set of control tools with Hades at 6. And I mean,
well,
you could
at 7, but you get to play it on 6.
Right. I was more kind of going at turn 6. But yeah, having access to Hades, it is also the color combination that I think is more likely to play Elsa.
Yeah.
The Big Elsa, which has never been a bad card.
It's the only color combo at this point that plays Big Elsa. And that's sort of more of a tech option, but it's definitely powerful.
And it's never been a bad card, but it's always I can't consistently get to that ink.
I think it's great as well. I think it is limited always by the fact that it does not have ruby or steel in it, so it does not have a way to, in the same way that Emerald Amethyst does, it is sort of forced to play hard into the board. It can't ever give up the board for a brief time.
Sure.
To play like proactive, like Ruby Sapphire can just ignore the board for a couple turns if they need to ramp or regain hand control or hand size. Like same with Ruby Amethyst, right? Because they can just wipe the board at some point. Steel Song can sort of like take their foot off the gas for a second if they need to establish something that can sing Whole New Worlds or whatever, right? But you really can't. You don't have the option to do that. With Blurple, you have to always respect the board, because as soon as you lose the board, you're fighting an uphill battle again, right? But the cool thing, of course, is being able to play all of your amazing Amethyst cards a turn early. You get an earlier Genie and an earlier Elsa, and it's pretty cool. There's a lot of new developments. I know that there's some players out there doing some things with different styles, and that's the thing that I think right now is interesting with Blurple, as Lindsay has been updating me with all of the different versions and all the different approaches. There right now is like the hard thing is fitting everything in the deck, right? It's the only deck right now that I think can viably play Popsicle Bell. I think it's the deck where like you have all the Amethyst card draw, but then also you're like, I don't want to be like bouncing rabbits in this faster, evasive metagame.
Sure.
I need to retain things on board. So it's like some of the older styles are being pushed out, for some of the, more like cantrippy stuff. You're playing, most decks are playing 4 genies and running less copies of rabbit. And so there's just a lot of wiggle room, and I think that the potential is there, but I think it is the kind of deck that it's going to play way better into a more solved meta. It benefits from the meta being like not stagnant, but like it benefits from the meta being solved, so it can like really be thoughtful in which cards it does and doesn't play, because otherwise, you have a lot of cards that are like, oh man, if I play, like playing Pan Shadow is such a big commitment in that deck. You have to, so it's like, okay, if you're doing that, then what are you cutting? Like goats? Like what are you cutting?
Yeah.
So
I think Ruby, Amethyst, and Blurple are the two color combos that don't necessarily benefit from being like the modular during deck building,
mhm.
but they are better off playing all of the really great tools they've got available to them, and they are probably pretty rigid in the deck building. We like to know what you're gonna run up against,
Oh,
like you just said.
I see. They have a lot of options, but you don't want to play a little bit of everything. You can't
Yeah,
toolbox them. Yeah.
it's not a deck you want to toolbox during deck building. You want to play consistent. Like you benefited a lot in Ruby Amethyst by playing your 15 by 4 list,
Yeah.
by having the really consistent options and having more of them and knowing what's in the deck.
Yeah.
But I think it is they Blurple and both Ruby Amethyst benefit from being they are the two best reactive decks during gameplay.
Yeah, yeah, because you can, if you know what you're likely to face, you can massively adjust the way you build it, the way you want to draw your cards, the way you want to curve out, like to punish different decks. I mean, it's the reason why the Flynn Sisu, Castle curve was so strong for a while in Ruby Amethyst. Which, by the way, let's just go ahead and jump in on that one since we're bleeding over into Ruby Amethyst.
Makes
Because
sense.
let's be honest, Blurple and Ruby Amethyst are the same deck in a different font, like Lindsay likes to say. I mean, it's an oversimplification, but it is kind of accurate in many ways. Gibby, Ruby Amethyst.
Keep it right to where it is. It
Oh,
is.
you're gonna put
I
it S tier.
I do. I think it is.
Interesting.
I think the ceiling for Ruby Amethyst is we're back.
Yeah.
And I am excited
Hmm.
because I don't think Ruby Amethyst is back in an annoying way. Like it
Mm.
was this boogeyman color combination that everyone hated to see, that was so annoyed that there
Yeah.
was nothing to take it off the mountain, and that like it was
Mm.
just on a pedestal, and the developers just kept feeding it and feeding it and feeding it tools, and we're like, can we stop? And now that's how I feel about Ruby Sapphire. And I'm happy. I was so happy
Yeah,
to see that Flowerstone got banned because I'm like,
for sure.
good, all of you go away. But Ruby Amethyst has surprisingly and very happily grown
Right.
into all branched into a bunch of different avenues. And I think that's awesome for the
Right.
color combination, whether it's a more aggressive version, if it's a more evasive heavy version, as we're seeing a lot more of now, or if it's the classic Ruby Amethyst control.
Hmm.
I've even seen some location versions pop out that
Yeah.
are surprisingly interesting,
Yep.
but all of them feel viable.
Right.
And I think that's just because of the natural strength of some of the more consistent and more commonly used tools, like the bounce package and some of the Ruby removal tools. If you're playing anything other than aggro in it,
Hmm.
you're probably including Be Prepared, which has returned back to being a really great tool.
Right.
It's got a great card draw. I think that Ruby Amethyst is one of the most reliable, if not the most reliable, color combo to build. And regardless of the direction that you go,
Hmm.
as long as you are a good player or a decent player and you are well up to speed on the version that you have built and you are playing,
Hmm.
I think you're definitely in contention.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's funny. I was gonna put it in A tier, but I mean, I love it. I love Ruby Amethyst. It's my favorite deck. Um,
I've got no problem putting it up there. It's got a proven track record. It's not
yeah.
like a lot has changed, and nothing of the new meta post Hiram has made Ruby Amethyst worse.
I think the line, and actually, because we have decided to do it this way, I think the line is that Ruby Amethyst is not currently S tier, but I think that it has S tier potential as a color
Hmm.
combination because,
Hmm.
again, once the meta becomes more solved, I mean, you really do have the ability to say, okay, do I want to run this evasive package? How much? Or do I want to pivot over to rabbits? And do I want to go back to like rabbit bounce with snakes? Do I want to be playing Big Maui with the pan? Do I want to be playing Tremaines and Medusas? Do I want to be playing Big Sisu so that I can handle discard a little bit better and wipe the Prince Johns off the board? I mean, do I want to just turtle with all of the cantripping 1-drops in the library and do like Ed's list from, early of last set and just say, nah, I'm just gonna play for the B prep and ignore everything else and create a massive hand advantage, right? Like you can really play it a ton of different ways. You can play it mid range or control. I mean, theoretically, you can play it aggro, but I don't think that's as good. But you can build a mid-range version that can quest very aggressively. And we were actually seeing that starting to pop up and have some success right before the Hiram ban was these really aggressive, like they're playing, the Surfer minis again, right? So there's a lot of ways, to tackle it. And I think you're right. I guess it does have that S tier potential at all times.
Yeah, to echo myself from a couple minutes ago, I'm sounding really smart right now. I think I agree with everything you just said, and it highlights my notion that it doesn't benefit you to be modular and toolbox during deck building in most Ruby Amethyst decks, in my opinion, outside of maybe a couple slots. But if you commit in deck building to how you're going to win and what you plan to deal with, the world's your oyster during the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and deck building, deck building to try to beat everything is usually, no matter what deck you're playing, it's usually not a good way to approach it. But because Ruby Amethyst is situated with so many different ways to build it, then once you pick that avenue that you think is going to give you the best chance of success, you're so consistent. You have so much great top end options. Yeah, I mean, I love consistency.
You love to see it.
Honestly, like if you look at our tier list, it's like the consistency tier list. You know what I mean? Like, I ding decks like Emerald Steel that are probably S tier potential, but I ding them because I hate inconsistency. So let's talk about one deck that is sort of the epitome of aggressive consistency. Amethyst Steel. Gibby, this is one of your favorite color combinations once again. It's having its moment right now.
Yeah.
Big performances over the last 2 weekends, but especially this weekend. Where does this live?
Yeah, we're ending on a high note for the two color combinations left that are very much within my wheelhouse. Amethyst Steel. I was really hopeful. This has been one of my favorite color combo since set 2. But I was running a very flood-born, shift-heavy version, and I loved it, and it was more control-y. But I took some seasons off from it, probably a good 4 or 5, because I just didn't believe that it was strong enough. I didn't believe it was the right time.
Yep.
Last set, I was hopeful that we were returning back to an Amethyst Steel sandbox that it could compete. And I think there were several people that thought it could.
Well, most of our testing group at one point, you, Lindsay, Brian, like you were all on Amethyst Steel, and I was the lone holdout. And
you helped us sort through our thoughts, and I think through us doing so, I was the first of the believers to jump ship, and thus spawned our me bringing back the Amber Steel aggro to the table, which you and I just sat over in a corner and just tooled with it.
We did. Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But Amethyst Steel, I think they got the tool, maybe a tool or two, that really pushed it over the edge, which was Cobra, Giant Cobra being another tool that can drop a significant piece of lore, being 2 lore by discarding a card and immediately from hand onto board. And if you
don't even have to discard us. I mean,
you could just play it as a 4/4
in the early game. It's I mean, you usually don't want to go down early game, but having that late game opportunity to just go, oh look, what do you know? I'm at 18 lore. Boop.
Yeah, and if you're, for that matter, take away the part where you gain the 2 lore immediately coming down. It essentially, you can consider it like a 2-dropper or like a 2 defense or a 3 defense, because if they were going to target it with like a strength or something like that, it would have died anyway, right?
Right.
So
it's thinkable. So if you're playing against a deck with a lot of ways to disrupt it, you just
a lot of steel. If you're playing against steel song, just get rid of it until you need it at the end and you need the lore. So I think it is a great card for it. In some versions, you're even seeing Honey Marin as another option to be able to
bursty build. Yeah.
Yeah, to gain another additional piece of lore. Amethyst Steel feels variable and it feels viable. There's several different avenues to go from a mid-range to an aggressive version. There's shift versions, which I think are
Hmm.
less likely to see to top an event. But a lot of testing is going into Amethyst Steel right now, and I don't think it's solved, but I think we're getting closer to it. I do think a proper Amethyst Steel version, which is probably where I'll go if I end up playing it, is going to be similar to Ruby Amethyst, where it runs 15 by 4 or close to it,
Yeah,
and
very
it's
consistent.
just super consistent. You know
Yep.
what you're going to draw, and the game plan is through and through, like right off the bat. Like you know how you're going to close this game out. You know what tools you need to draw into in order to finish and get over the finish line.
I
Um,
do.
yeah.
Sorry, before you give us your verdict on where you think it's placed, I do really like that you have a lot of card draw tools that you can sort of say, you know what, I really want to play this dock build. I really want to, like, play my hand out and then refill my hand and keep playing it out and keep the, foot on the gas for most of the game. Or you can do the build where you're like, you know what, I'm going to play a bunch of rabbits and I'm going to use them to sing Zeus's, and that's really strong. And if they kill my board, I get my cards back. I like that you can sort of blend Zeus's, genies, docks. Like, you have a lot of different ways to play. You have these great steel removal songs, big bodies, ways to gain quick lore. I mean, I don't think that this is never being played as anything higher than a fast mid range deck. You're not really seeing this taking the controlling option except against true aggro. But it's really nice that it can do that pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, I'm even interested in a version of Amethyst Steel, which we've seen where people are splashing Happy in there as a one
Mm-hmm.
drop to be able to deal
Yep.
with Diablo. But you can just as easily, just like you do it in Steel Song or like in Amber Steel, you
Yep.
can just as easily build a Seven Dwarves Mine version in
Yep.
Amethyst Steel to help deal with give you another damage option while still playing a unit and location focused, non-ditchable from the song aspect. Um, Add some additional removal to it. So I think that is also a very interesting route. I flip between A and S, so I will defer to you on where you think it fits better.
I walked into this video thinking I would put it in S tier. My only reservation is we felt that way last set. My reservation was last set leading up to set champs. We were like, this deck's crazy. It's so cracked. It's insane. And we got. I mean, it's solid, very consistent, but it wasn't at the level of broken that we felt a deck needed to be to consistently perform well and roll up to set champs and dominate. And I mean, we jumped ship, and then both of us rolled up to our first set champs and got playmats because we jumped ship. And the people
Yeah.
that did play it had bad performances. Like, I mean, across the board. I think the first set champ I walked into, there were like 6 or 7, Amethyst Steel players of the 30 plus people, and they all were under 500. Like, they were all, none of them made top cut. None of them were close to making top cut. You know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
like, I'm worried. It's like Amethyst Steel always looks really good at the start of a meta. It always looks really good because it's consistent. It's efficient. Consistency and efficiency are really important for a lot of decks, and then the other decks are trying to figure out how to achieve those two things themselves. So I don't know. I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to pull this one up, and I'm just going to take the lead and just say Amber Steel is obviously S tier.
Yeah.
Steel Song is probably the most ridiculous deck when it doesn't lose to itself. Steel Song only seems to ever lose to itself. It doesn't really lose to other decks. It just loses to itself because of consistency. And oh, dang it, I didn't find my whole new world. Now, you can tech for it. You can be an Ursula Deceiver deck that is trying to rip those tactical songs out of the hand. But you can't get rid of Ariel, usually before Ariel comes down and finds you the new answer. It is, Emerald Steel maybe has the ways to disrupt it from early in the game, but you got to hit the right pieces at the right time. It's hard to beat Sapphire Steel consistently, especially on the draw. Man, Sapphire Steel, or sorry, not Sapphire Steel, Amber Steel, Steel Song on the draw or on the play is brutal. I mean, just so strong, so consistent, so difficult to remove their singers, whether they're shifting Robins, they're playing Biancas, they're hitting aerials into removal to kill the things that you just established. It's really tough. I mean, it's always beatable if they draw bad. And then on the flip side, you have Amber Steel aggro, which we've had a ton of success with, and I worry this is our bias, but I think that the reality is it's kind of like, well, let me take the things that are really strong about the early game of Amber Steel and just speed the rest of the curve up. And just try to just say, I'm going to play Cindy with the 3-drop songs. But then from that point on, I'm playing aggressive questers with beefy bodies. I'm playing, refill in the form of Doc and Rapunzel. I think that deck is still very good.
Yeah.
So I think that this is an undisputed S tier. Do you agree? Am
I
we
do.
on the same page?
Yes, I do. I think Steel Song is another deck where if you've got practice on it, you can take an event any day, any time of the week.
Yeah.
It is just such a really cohesive game plan. It always has been. It is also one of those decks that feels like it picks its moments to shine based off of what else is also in the meta.
Yeah.
And I think we're back to a place where it is phenomenal.
So,
Troubadour was a good addition to it too.
Yeah,
At the
nice.
at the 2-drop
Penny.
slot, Penny's not bad either. I think Troubadour is it's a durable 2 Akasapaya that enables you to be able to play the Along Came Zeus, which was always kind of floating on the edge of like, can I play it? Do I play it? Does it make it worth the slot? But dropping it on 2 and just ruining your opponent's entire momentum is fantastic.
Just to put a pin in this, we have 4 S tier decks. I think that's unacceptable. I think I would like to ask you to vote someone off the island to push them into A tier.
I don't think I can do that easily. I think the one that goes down to the A tier is Amethyst Steel.
Amethyst Steel. Now I know I had to sell you on Red Blue. Do you think that is? You think between these two, you know?
Yes, I think that is. I think because the skill expression of a top tier player makes better use of Ruby Sapphire than it does on Amethyst Steel.
Okay, we'll bump Amethyst Steel down to A tier. And there you have it, folks. This is our color combination tier list post-Hiram here in set 7 of Disney Lorcana. There is only a few weeks left until set championships. And in that time, we are going to be concluding a lot of our, testing and evaluating a lot of the tournament results and trying to come up with our recommendations for specific deck lists for many of these colors, and we will be putting those out in the weeks to come. But in the meantime, whether we put your favorite deck in S tier or C tier, I think everything from here and above is viable, which, boy, is that so cool to say. There's so much, I think, diversity in Disney Lorcana right now, which I think that, even just 2 or 3 sets ago, we would be looking at half as many decks playable, which is just extremely exciting to see. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We can't wait to share more of our set championship recommendations here in the coming weeks. See ya.